Professor used the evolution theory from the viewpoint of Christianity, the thorough analysis of the descent or origin of man. Lecture 35, Author's Final Conclusion. Evolutionists assert that Charles Darwin, through the evolution theory, laid the logical foundation of denying the creation. But both the origin of species and the origin of man show that there was no intention to deny the creation in his belief. I am aware that the conclusions arrived at in this work will be denounced by some as highly irreligious, but he who denounces them is bound to show why it is more irreligious to explain the origin of man as a distinct species by descent from some lower form, through the laws of variation and natural selection, than to explain the birth of the individual through the laws of ordinary reproduction. He makes it very emphatic that the variation of species and man is the law of nature, and the attitude to relate this law to religious belief should be wiped out. The next speech corroborates the concept of the creation and the evolution cherished in his heart. The birth both of the species and of the individual are equally parts of that grand sequence of events which our mind refuses to accept as the result of blind chance. The phrase, that grand sequence of events, implies itself the creation and the evolution followed by. A thread of connection links that grand sequence of events, and there is grandeur in this view of life, which was referred to in the origin of species. Many of the views which have been advanced are highly speculative, and some no doubt will prove erroneous. Here, the views is just the word for the phrase, the evolution of man. Making the proviso mentioned above, Charles Darwin produced 4 evidences to show that man has evolved. 1. The embryological structure of man. 2. The homologies. 3. The rudiments. And 4. The reversions. By considering the embryological structure of man, the homologies which he presents with the lower animals, the rudiments which he retains, and the reversions to which he is liable, we can partly recall in imagination the former condition of our early progenitors, and can approximately place them in their proper place in the zoological series. He expatiates that man is an enigmatic being to be considered specially, though it is a matter of general knowledge that man has evolved from some lower form in common with all others. It is not probable that through the law of analogous variation, a member of one of the other lower subgroups should have given rise to a man-like creature resembling the higher anthropomorphous apes in so many respects. No doubt, man, in comparison with most of his allies, has undergone an extraordinary amount of modification, chiefly in consequence of the great development of his brain and his erect position. Nevertheless, we should bear in mind that he is but one of several exceptional forms of primates. If the anthropomorphous apes be admitted to form a natural subgroup, then, as man agrees with them not only in all those characters which he possesses in common with the whole canine group, but in other peculiar characters such as the absence of a tail and or callosities, and in general appearance, we infer that some ancient member of the anthropomorphous subgroup gave birth to man. And as man from a genealogical point of view belongs to the canine or old world stock, however much the conclusion may revolt our pride that our early progenitors would have been properly thus designated. But we must not fall into the error of supposing that the early progenitors of the whole simian stock, including man, was identical with or even closely resembled any existing ape or monkey. Charles Darwin accentuates the most important fact that we must not suppose, because our genealogical methodology is not a completed or absolute one, that monkey is the early progenitor of man. Nevertheless, evolutionists, failing to notice the fact like this, say that Charles Darwin asserted man was evolved from a monkey in his evolution theory. We are far from knowing how long ago it was when man first diverged from the canine stock, nor should it be forgotten that those regions which are the most likely to afford remains connecting man with some extinct ape-like creature have not as yet been searched by geologists. Although it is clearly probable to infer that man has evolved, judging from the viewpoint of morphology, from the anthropoid, we don't have any evidences that justify it. So, Charles Darwin says that we must be cautious not to do such a foolish thing. Evolutionists constructed a series: fish, amphibia, reptile, bird, mammal, Homo sapiens, in order to rationalize the procedure of the advent of man. This is just what Charles Darwin warned. In the great kingdom of the vertebrata, it has culminated in man, but no one can at present say by what line of descent the three higher and related classes, namely mammals, birds, and reptiles, were derived from the two lower vertebrate classes, namely amphibians and fishes. Thus, we have given to man a pedigree of prodigious length, but not, it may be said, of noble quality. What Charles Darwin said is up to here. The evolution theory is not a completed one. Furthermore, it is a theory which cannot be completed absolutely, because man cannot find the fossils of the original form that God created and cannot understand God's will. Charles Darwin proposed only one number of cases, namely evolution as a cause of variations with creatures. But evolutionists changed it intentionally into an absolute truth of nature, without ascertaining if it is true. This is the difference between the evolution theory and the evolutionism, and this difference distorted Charles Darwin's implication to guide us wrongly, until now, elucidating the evidence that all civilized nations were once barbarous. Charles Darwin says as follows: many existing superstitions are the remnants of former false religious beliefs. The highest form of religion, the grand idea of God, hating sin and loving righteousness, was unknown during primeval times. This shows his earnest faith cherished in his heart. He was a man fearing the Lord God. This is the end of all my lectures on the origin of man, which says that man is the modified descendant of some pre-existing lower form. I thank you for your attentive listening to my long lectures. Shalom.